Hello, South Branch Troop 7-8 Kinders. This week is Games Week. I'm going to read a book called 8 O'Clock by Jill Cretin and Pierre-Paul Parasu. It's about a game called What Time Is It, Mr. Wolf? Maybe you've played it. After listening to the story, please play What Time Is It, Mr. Wolf? Or any other games that you like to play. This is our last video together before the summer. I hope that you will be safe during the summer and have fun, and we'll see you next year. Bye-bye.
8 O'Clock by Jill Cretin and Pierre-Paul Parasu. Mr. Wolf moved into the empty house beside the chicken coop. Right next door to dinner, he chuckled, rubbing his paws together. He put on his speckled tie, his feather-patterned waistcoat, his egg brooch, and his chicken watch. Then he went to introduce himself to the hens. "How do you do?" he said sweetly, leaning over the fence. "How are you today?"
"We're fine,"
said the chickens.
"Just clucky. Thank you very much."
And they all giggled the way chickens do. "Would you care to join me for dinner?" said Mr. Wolf. "This evening,"
"How kind."
said the chickens. Mr. Wolf grinned. "I'll call you at 8, he said. The chickens looked at his beautiful watch.
"What time is it, Mr. Wolf?"
1 o'clock, said the wolf. He smiled craftily to himself, thinking what a very big stew he would be able to make. Mr. Wolf went home and cleaned his kitchen in readiness for the chicken dinner. "Those chickens will never guess my plan," he snickered. "They're such pea brains." He washed dishes and dried dishes. He swept the floor and wiped the counters. His chores took him 1 hour. The chickens passed by his window carrying coils of rope.
"What time is it, Mr. Wolf?"
they called. Mr. Wolf stuck his head out the window. 2 o'clock. He smiled politely, showing his teeth, white teeth, and wondered about the rope. Mr. Wolf pulled his head back in and opened the kitchen cupboard to drag out his largest cauldron. It was dirty, and a spider had laid eggs in it. He scrubbed and cleaned and polished the cauldron until it glowed. Then rolled it over to the fireplace and lifted it onto the iron hook. That took him 1 hour. The chickens passed by his window, wheeling wooden boards in a wheelbarrow.
"What time is it, Mr. Wolf?"
They giggled. 3 o'clock, he answered. "Those chickens certainly are busy," he murmured, absently minded, rubbing his belly. Mr. Wolf began carrying buckets of water from the steam to fill up the big cauldron. He made 14 trips back and forth. All that carrying took him 1 hour. On his last trip up from the stream, Mr. Wolf met the chickens carrying bags of nails, hammers, and 2 big padlocks.
"What time is it, Mr. Wolf?"
they asked. 4 o'clock, he answered, licking his lips. "I've never seen such busy chickens," he thought. The chickens winked and smiled and waved as they passed by. Mr. Wolf went out into the forest with a sack to gather wood for his fire. He dragged it home and laid the dry sticks neatly under the cauldron, all ready to light. Gathering the wood took him 1 hour. There was a lot of noise, hammering, banging, squawking, coming from next door. Mr. Wolf went out and peeked over the fence to see what was going on. The chickens were building a big crate. "Chickens building?" Mr. Wolf chuckled to himself. "How ridiculous." 3 chickens stood in the yard near the fence.
"What time is it, Mr. Wolf?"
they asked, smiling sweetly. 5 o'clock, he answered, drooling down his furry chin. Mr. Wolf hurried home and cut up a big stack of vegetables to go in the chicken stew: carrots, onions, celery, potatoes, and some green pepper. "Dumplings would go nicely," he said to himself, and he mixed up a batch of thick batter and set the bowl aside with a cloth over it. The chopping and mixing took him 1 hour. Then Mr. Wolf peeked out his door. The chickens were all inside the hen house, gathered round the telephone. One chicken poked her head out.
"What time is it, Mr. Wolf?"
she called. 6 o'clock, he answered, staring at his fat belly. She slammed the door. "Rude," he murmured, but pleasingly plump. Mr. Wolf decided to set the table. First, he ironed his best tablecloth and smoothed it over the table. He laid out his shiniest silver, his chicken platter, and a bright red napkin to go around his neck. In the center of the table, he placed a large silver dish to catch the bones and a glass full of peppermint-flavored toothpicks. On the kitchen counter, he set his sharp knives, his ladles, his spoons, and a chopping board all in a row. All this took him 1 hour. The chickens were pecking in the yard, but they lifted their heads and fluttered their wingtips at Mr. Wolf when he came out.
"What time is it, Mr. Wolf?"
They cackled. 7 o'clock, he murmured in a quiet, crafty voice. Soon it would be dark. Mr. Wolf went indoors, humming to himself. He covered the cauldron and lit the fire to heat the water. Next door, he heard a truck backing up, so he peeked out the window. The chickens were struggling to lift the big crate they had built into the truck. 3 pigs were helping them. Eggs going out, Mr. Wolf thought, and flicked the curtains shut. He went to hunt for some clean cloth sacks and a pillowcase to save the feathers. Then Mr. Wolf took off his speckled tie, his patterned waistcoat, and his egg brooch, and he laid his chicken watch gently on top of the dresser. 1 hour had crept by. His stomach was rumbling as he tiptoed down the front steps. His claws were itching as he sneaked toward the chicken coop and slithered through the gate. His teeth were glistening as he pushed open the door of the henhouse with his chilly black nose. The chickens cackled in front of the mirrors and fluffed up their feathers. Each of them turned one bright eye towards the door.
What time is it, Mr. Wolf?
They lisped disdainfully. Dinner time, roared Mr. Wolf, and he leapt inside. There was a screeching and a growling and a thumping and a bumping and a scuffling and a howling and a squawking. The henhouse door burst open. Out came Mr. Wolf, followed by all the chickens. He bounced down the path, trussed up tighter than a holiday turkey, tied in 100 knots. His toes stuck out one end, his nose out the other, and his tail flopped along like an old feather duster. The chickens twirled him over to the truck. The 3 pigs rolled him up the ramp. Everyone jostled him into the crate, slammed it shut, and snapped on the 2 big padlocks. Before Mr. Wolf knew what had happened, the pigs jumped into the truck, started at the engine, and roared away down the road. Chickens fell to the ground, giggling hilariously. At last, with tears running down their beaks, they got up and went next door. All laid out for them was a lovely feast. Chopped carrots, onions, celery, potatoes, and some green pepper. There was even batter for dumplings.